right, everybody, welcome in to NorCal Sports Network. Giants lose a tough one as they fight back, but lose it 8-7. And we welcome in former Giants top dog, general manager, Bobby Evans. What a treat. Welcome, Bobby. Thank you for joining.
No, my pleasure, Dan. Nice to be with you, Bora.
You too.
Yes. For you guys that don't know, watching in the chat live here on YouTube and right now on X, Bora played for Bobby Evans' Little League All-Star team. And so they go back a ways. I guess, what was that, about 8 years ago, Bora? When you were 12?
Yeah, so about 8 years, yeah.
About 8 years. Okay. So a reunion, so to speak. And it's great to have both you guys. So we're going to get right into it. We won't touch on the Giants much, guys. We're just going to say, hey, it was a valiant effort, a little too late, but the Giants fall to the Diamondbacks 8-7. At least it was an exciting, entertaining game. But since we have Bobby here tonight, I don't want to spend too much time just on the game, on the post game itself. Rather utilize our time well and hear from Bobby and hear from his experiences in baseball. And we'll get started with that. Bobby, I read your bio and everything on, about you, but for everybody else, tell us how you got started in the game.
I just like anybody, as a kid, all I ever dreamed of was playing in the big leagues. And so, when I went to college, I thought, I would try to walk on at North Carolina. I didn't realize how tough that would be. So a year after, ended up as a student manager my freshman year, and then I played summer ball in Central Florida, and I came back and again was told I wouldn't make the team, so I ended up playing club baseball. But that summer, after my sophomore year, I got an internship, with the Boston Red Sox, and Lou Gorman was the general manager, Eddie Casco the scouting director, Ed Kinney Sr., Ed Kinney Jr., Dick Bresciani in the PR department. Just a great experience. It really opened my eyes to opportunities in baseball outside of playing the game. And so a couple of years later, I'm graduating, and I ended up as a finalist in an interview for a job in the commissioner's office, and was fortunate enough to get it. And, that started a 2.5-year run in New York in the commissioner's office. And then Brian Sabian and Tony Siegel called and offered me a job in San Francisco. And so here they had just won 100 and some ball games and ended up in second place to Atlanta in '93. Oh. Dusty Baker's the manager, and I had gotten to know him a little bit as one of the general managers in the Arizona Fall League. And so, here I was coming to San Francisco, and it was on the cusps of something we thought would be great. Of course, '94 ended up being the strike year, and then we struggled in '95 and '96. Brian took over in '97 as GM, and we had a great run together, and it was a lot of fun.
Yeah, and then you took over you had a lot to do with the Giants minor league system. You were involved heavily there and became director of the minor leagues at one point, I think, right? In 2005, was it?
Right. Yeah. My time started as an assistant in the minor league department at Candlestick, and then after the strike year, opportunities opened up to do a lot more. And by the time early 2000s came, I was, having a lot of fun with Dick Tidrow, Jack Hyatt, and of course Brian, and learning a lot about the player development side, and certainly some of the amateur scouting side. I loved working in player development. It was a lot of fun to just see how players would come in so young and so green, and yet would develop over time. And our player development people had to be good evaluators too, because ultimately where players get assigned and where they hit in the lineup, and what position they ultimately play. We had a lot of meetings and conversations and debates and post game, pre game, watching of our players and evaluating their progress. And I just feel like I was mentored by really great people. Of course, mm-hmm. Brian first and foremost, but obviously Dick Tidrow and Jack Hyatt, and really a lot of our coaches over the years, just their assessment of the game and these players, and really helping build winning teams in the minor leagues, which hopefully would help translate to a big league level, which, as we saw later on, it did.
Right. Did you have any input in any of the players drafted, like Matt Cain or Lincecum? Any of that? Did any of those conversations?
Oh
Were
yeah, I
you
mean
involved in
you're
that?
in the draft room, but the real expertise with those guys ultimately lies in the scouts and
Mm.
Brian and Dick Tidrow, and really they're putting their heads together. I mean, my job for the most part, after Ned left to go to the Dodgers, my job became not only signing the fifth round to the 50th round draft picks, but then I had to start signing the top 5 rounds as well, and dealing with the major league free agents and the arbitration cases and all that. And so, yeah, I mean, the draft was a very stressful time because we were locked into those draft rooms sometimes for 10 days or 2 weeks just preparing.
Wow.
And a lot of my time was spent talking to agents and trying to understand expectations of these players. So we didn't draft a kid in a place that he wouldn't sign. And by the time, again, when Ned left in 05, 06, that those conversations really were all mine. And that was, it was a great experience, but it was also a real puzzle. You had to put together, every draft with the bonus structure that we had and the limitations that certainly the draft numbers that were given to us by Major League Baseball, and yeah, it was a great experience. I mean, we get these guys drafted, but then you got to get them signed, and then you got to get them out into the system. And I remember you go back to any of these drafts, whether it's Lincecum or Bumgarner or Posey or Crawford, Belt, any of these guys that really helped us in Romo even further down in the draft.
Mm.
Wilson. I mean, these guys, they all, as they came through our draft and ultimately got signed, it was a real great experience. I mean, it was phenomenal, and obviously a great minds put together when in those draft rooms. Not one person, but a collective group, help make those decisions.
Yeah. Yeah. That's incredible. Now, so you were there obviously for all 3 World Series championships, and then was it 2015 you got the promotion to general manager of the
Yeah, I
Giants?
mean, and I give Brian and Brian a lot of credit. Larry, of course, a lot of credit too. I mean, just to give me that opportunity after all those years together, 20+ years together, and I think that it was a hard act to follow. I mean, we had so much success, in our previous structure, and so as much as possible, really hated to see it change. But at the same time, I loved the opportunity, and I think Brian's belief in me and Brian's confidence in me really helped give me confidence to be able to be a part of making a lot of those bigger time decisions. But still had the greatest manager in baseball in Bruce Bochy, so that made my job a lot easier too. And plus, we still had a great core that we had to
Right.
work around. And so, really, we were just trying to find the right way to keep the championship years going. And we felt like we had a chance in 15, but certainly had even a better chance in 16. But then the wheels fell off in 17 and 18 between injuries and not going out and getting enough additional offense in the winter, and ultimately Larry and ownership decided to make a change. So it was no regrets. I mean, 25 great years, a lot accomplished together, great friends, great memories, and a lot to be proud of. And hopefully we'll get to see a number of those guys from Posey and Bochy to
Yeah.
Sabian all in the Hall of Fame one day, and we'll all be there to celebrate. So.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, as a Giants fan, a longtime Giants fan, really since 1968, when I was 7 years old, started following baseball pretty heavily. I've watched this Giants team, and you took over 15, 16. You guys, got the wild card, and almost had the Cubs beat in Game 4, the breakdown of the bullpen, and didn't get to see Johnny Cueto in Game 5, but then things started to fall apart. But you made the trade for Andrew McCutchen was it the 2017 season? McCutchen was
Actually going into 2018.
going into 18, right? 17 was just a rough year. Team lost 8 games, I think it was in 17. So you made the trade. At the time, it looked like a pretty good trade. I mean, it was, you did have to give up Brian Reynolds, but you had the I don't know what the internal fortitude to make a move. You were, moves needed to be made. And I guess what I'm disappointed in as a fan is you were given only really 3 years. I guess what, 15, 16, and 17, I guess 18 as well. But you made the playoffs in 16, 17, 18 are rough, but the cupboard was a little bit empty. The vets were getting older. The team was needed to be replenished. You take some risks, you make some moves, and then the team decides to move on. And yet the current regime, we're in year 6 and not much to show for it. Very little moves, meaningful moves. One major trade that I can think of was Chris Bryant. And that was, you were forced to, you had to do something. You were the top team in baseball, and you needed the team needed an extra jolt because the Dodgers were making moves at the deadline. And so that was something that, had to be done, but no other real meaningful moves. We saw a trade this offseason for Robbie Ray, which was, seems like a good move on paper, but there hasn't been a lot of moves. And I don't know. I don't expect you to comment on it. I'm just saying, I'll say I'm disappointed that the Giants let you go in such a short amount of time. And you drafted Ramos, you drafted Matos, you drafted Ryan Walker, you drafted Tyler Rogers,
Luciano.
Randy Rodriguez, a core part of this team. And yet, we're still sitting on Matos and Luciano, and the new regime hasn't even really given them what I would consider a fair shot. I don't think less than 100 at bats over a few years is going to help anybody. So how does that feel for you when you go through something like that?
I'm extremely proud of these kids. I mean, we were signing Luciano and Matos and, Doval, all, Rodriguez, all these guys at 16 internationally. Ramos was 17, coming in the draft, and to be able to pick some pitchers down below, a la Romo years ago, down lower, and here's Ryan Walker, and obviously we overpaid Webb for the slot where we took him. And
that's right, Logan Webb, another one, yeah.
So there's a lot of pride because I know how hard our guys work out there in the field and in the amateur market, international market, and to see them have success. I mean, I feel like that's what Brian and I think tried to do as much as possible is put them in a position to succeed, make sure they had the support from the front office. We give enough direction to make ourselves, clear on what our expectations are, but ultimately, let them do their best work. And they did great work. I mean, they did obviously did us very proud. I mean, we get out and see some of these guys, but ultimately the hard work is done day to day, sometimes years in advance of seeing these guys as amateurs at a lower level in high school, or as they get up in the senior year in high school or the early years of college. And then from an international standpoint, I mean, you're starting to see these kids at 14 and 15 and sometimes sooner. And so there's a lot of pride in seeing these guys have success. I mean, the player development system, there's some guys that come into the system, a la Buster Posey, who develops himself in a sense. All you got to do is just make sure you stay out of the way, give him at bats. We're going to have good instruction. I mean, there's no way he gets there without, leadership and coaching of, not only our major league coaches like Billy Hayes and Dave Righetti and Bochy and all, but also our minor league coaches in the system who are helping, day to day to put these guys in a position to succeed. And so, yeah, when you see a roster full of guys that have come up through under your watch and through the system, it really gives you a lot of pride. And yeah, you'd love to be there, to be with them. But, I think when ownership gives you a chance to be somewhere for 25 years, it's kind of hard to get upset when they don't give you 3 more or 2 more, much less 5 more. I mean, you're just happy to get those 25. And, we did a lot of great and fun things together, and they believed in us for a long time. And so I think the game at the time, had some shifts to it in terms of, what was marketable for front offices. And, I think Brian and I really worked hard to keep a balance of how we did it. We valued the numbers, and also valued the players and the people and the coaches and the scouts, collectively. We believed in everybody playing their role to help us be successful. and the game was shifting a little bit at the time that they moved sort of out of that leadership role. And I understand. I mean, they weren't the only club making some of those changes, and I think they hired one of the smartest guys in baseball. And unfortunately, things haven't bounced, Farhan's way. But it's still, it's still never your expectation, to do anything but compete. And when you add a Snell or you add a Chapman in the offseason, you'd like to think that's going to be a lot to help supplement. But injuries, and when you go through a month of baseball where you have 2 starters, that wears on your bullpen. It's going to definitely exhaust them. And so, hey, at the end of the day, I'm thankful that they, have those kind of guys for fans to watch. I think the fans overall have felt like the game has been more entertaining this year. Certainly seeing a lot of the young players, which I think they want to see more of. And for us, I've been at the ballpark, of course, many times this year, and no better days than when we were there to celebrate the Core 4 and then celebrate the 2014 World Series. So it's always fun to see the guys and reconnect.
Yeah. Now we got a lot of super fans in here. Lou Marston, he's one of our biggest fans. In fact, he's got 4 season tickets right next the front row, right next to the Giants dugout. He peeks into the Giants dugout here. He asked this question, and I don't know if you're able to answer it or not, but Bobby, if you were to take over the Giants, what would be your first step?
Yeah, I think it's just a matter of securing, cornerstone pieces to help your young players not have all the pressure. I mean, you want to make sure you have, key experienced, guys in your lineup, to help support the young players so they're not having to hit in the middle of the order right now. I think, we've got some good young pitching, with Harrison and hopefully, Birdsong, and then of course, not to never forget Webby, of course, at the top. And I think Snell, he's not the only guy out there, but you want to make sure you have a strong rotation. But the first move for me is really securing, the middle of the lineup with veteran bats that can make a difference.
Bobby, I want to going back to the international prospects, and I mean, you signed Luciano when he was 16. What is that experience like, and what's the process behind signing an international free agent at 16 years old versus the draft when these guys are in high school or college? I mean, are you personally going down to like Puerto Rico or the Dominican Republic and scouting them, or are you relying on your scouts that you have to watch them?
Well, yeah, I mean, we like to go down because we want to see it firsthand too. I mean, we have a beautiful complex named after Felipe Alou, and so it's wonderful to go down and see them for ourselves. But it's really our scouts and our director of international scouting that is, bringing all of it together. And so when we get there, we're able to see the guys that they've projected to be the best. And so we get to see the best of the best that they've been working hard to narrow that list and to find guys that really want to be Giants. And it's a hard dynamic because you can't sign them until they're 16, and at the same time there's other clubs stirring. And so you really need to have a trust factor between those that are representing the player and the player himself. There has to be a relationship that you build over time, and a lot of it is trust. And I can't do that in a quick visit, but I can empower our people to be able to honor their word and to back them up. And I really feel like that Joe Salermo, who is our director of international scouting for me, and I think continues to be, just really helped set the tone. Felix Peguero helped set the tone in the Dominican Republic to help us have our presence to be known, that we were after the best guys, that we were building an organization that was going to win with international players, and help show our tradition with our new facility named after Felipe. And I think, it takes an army. There's some domestic scouts that go over and see some of these top players. There's big commitments when you're signing Luciano and Amatos. There's a lot of money involved, but it takes a lot of work long before you get to that signing day to make sure you're getting the right guys, the right kind of guys who will carry themselves and represent the organization well.
I was looking at the 2012 World Series team. And I'm pretty sure, as I'm looking at it here, yeah, all 5 starting pitchers threw over 180 innings. You had Matt Cain throwing 219, Bumgarner throwing 208, Vogelsong 189, Lincecum 186, and Barry Zito 184. The past couple years with the Giants, we haven't had a solid rotation like that. Was that your guys' strategy to bolster that starting rotation to really carry you throughout the season?
Oh yeah, I mean, I think we felt like the bullpen is going to be stronger if if you can put a strong starting staff, in front of them. I mean, just because then you don't have to wear them down. And and we, in 2011, I think those 5 starters made 160 starts out of our 162 games. It was somewhere thereabout, and I think had Posey not gotten hurt, we might have seen a lot more fun in the postseason in 11 than we did. Of course, getting eliminated before the playoffs, but yeah, I think that was really really our experience, that going into every game knowing we had a guy that could take us deep, give us the best chance to scratch enough runs across the board to get the W. And there were times where you look at the 3 World Series teams, and each one of them had a different closer, and yet a lot of those core 5 starters, albeit probably in 2010 nobody was more important in the starting rotation than Lincecum. In 2012 nobody was more important than Matt Cain. In 2014 probably no one was more important than Madison Bumgarner. But all 3 of them were involved in all 3. Cain, of course, was out for the second half of the season in the playoffs in 2014. But if it weren't for his 100+ innings that he threw in 14, we probably don't get into the postseason and win that division or that wild card and go back and get a chance to compete for a Game 7 in the World Series. So, yeah, I mean, I think that starting pitching in general, I mean, I think that when we build a bullpen, we also didn't want to have just one look. I mean, I think that Dave Righetti, Mark Gardner, Dick Tidrow, they like to see a different look, so that the guys coming up to the plate weren't seeing the same kind of guy. So that's why Lopez was unique with his approach left-handed. Affelt was very different with his velo and his approach over the top. Obviously Casilla was much harder than Romo, and of course when Wilson was healthy, he was nasty too. So we had a lot of fun with those guys, and yeah, pitching and defense was really our post Bonds plan. So,
Bobby, I got a question from one of our chat members all the way from the United Kingdom watching.
nice.
Liam, one of our longtime listeners, and I'm going to add to this question, but he says, how much would you pay Soto, and do the Giants need to overpay to get him? And
Yeah,
I got a little bit more to add to that question.
Go ahead.
Well,
go ahead.
One, do the Giants, why is it that they cannot attract star hitters? Is it the ballpark? And if that is a problem, has there ever been any talk, or would you consider, if you were running the organization, if you were able to attract a Soto that said, hey, look, I don't want to hit in triples alley. It's just, it's going to pull from my stats. Would you be willing to bring in the dimensions a little bit to sign a star like that? If he said, I'll sign if you bring it in 15 feet or something like that. That's kind of a loaded question.
No, I like a guy who's more confident than that. I remember we had a left-handed hitter we were talking to that made that rare request to say that he was concerned about the ballpark, and that was disappointing for us, because quite frankly we want guys who believe that they can hit in our ballpark. We understand it's got its disadvantages and challenges and all, but shoot, I mean, no, I don't think that would be a consideration. I think overpaying or being aggressive. I mean, I think that the one thing that I think is key in free agency is making sure you know who you want, and making sure those that you want know that you want them, and you don't nickel and dime them. You go hard and go fast and make your best effort. I mean, that's all you can do. I mean, there's players out there that would love to play in San Francisco, but sometimes we put a final number on the table, and sometimes that's passed by others. I remember there's been teams that that were outbidding us just because they were in, state tax-free states. I mean,
Mm.
sometimes, but ultimately, I think that what I want players to be attracted to is I want them to be attracted to the guys in the locker room, the winning tradition of the organization, the ballpark, the city, the fans, and there's a lot to be proud of here. And we don't want a guy to not come here because we missed by a few $1,000,000, but we also want to make sure that we make the right deal. And I think that overpaying the right guy is I think that's part of it nowadays, right? But ultimately, I think we have to be aggressive, and sometimes that's going to have to come in the way of a trade. But in the case of a free agent, the numbers we're talking about now, we're talking about $300+ million for a Soto, and there's going to be maybe some tough years at the end of that
Well,
deal.
he turned down 440, so I'm sure he's looking at 5+ at this point in his career, right? I mean, and the numbers we saw.
Yeah.
Now, let me ask you this: if Soto, if the market was say 10-500, and the Giants, they've got money, they've got the project going with Mission Rock, the ballpark's paid for. You see what Ohtani's meaning to LA just in terms of merchandise revenue in a sold out stadium. And it appears that you really do need a star, not just an all-star, but a superstar. The Giants had Buster Posey, who I would consider a superstar. They were able to win championships because they had him, plus star players like Crawford and Belt and Pablo and Pence and, guys that weren't superstars, but were in their own right all-star players. And it seems like the Giants need that star. I looked at every team in the playoffs. It seems like every team has a superstar except the Brewers. What would it take? Like, would this be out of line to say, okay, we want Soto, we're willing to give $100 million more than the nearest competitor, and say, here's our offer? Can you ever negotiate and say, look, we want you, here's our offer, we're way up, take it or leave it, you got 72 hours, we don't want to just be playing back and forth and be played by other teams? Does it ever get to anything like that?
I mean, that's a desperate play. I think that you have to be confident in what you have to offer outside of, you want to pay, you're going to have to pay market, whatever market is, and maybe a little market plus. But all negotiations are going to play out. They're going to play out over time. There is no, one phone call and then there's a press conference. I mean, it's an ongoing communication path. The player is going to get his chance to be out in the market. He's going to take advantage. He's going to see where the market goes, and he's not going to play favorites. He may have a preference. He may know up front that this is the place I'd rather go. He's going to make that decision based on a lot of factors, and you've just got to play your best game and approach and pursuit of him. And money's not the only thing. I mean, money's going to be a big part of it, of course, but there's going to be a lot at play. And he's going to have teammates, playing other places that are going to be talking to him. He's going to have his own team do an analysis on what his stats look like in different ballparks. Of course, he's going to look at the teams that have the best chance to win. He's going to look at lineups and see where he thinks he fits the best, and for especially for a long period of time, what that lineup looks like. I mean, as you start to see young players come up through our system that are going to be here a while, I mean, that obviously plays to our advantage. I think the surrounding team is going to play a big factor in a lot of these guys' decisions, and ultimately their family preferences too. And there's some things you can't control, and money's not going to be the only factor. And I think the way you get it done from a financial perspective is you negotiate in good faith and you stay aggressive. When he asks for 2, you give him 2.5.
Mm-hmm.
You just stay a little bit ahead of him. You don't have to offer a blank check. You be aggressive and have confidence. Mm-hmm. He can't be your only option. He might be your only option.
Yeah.
But when you're negotiating it, he can't be your only option. You've got to have other options that the agent knows that you can pivot to, and you've got to, your pivot might be your next best move. It might end up being your best move. So.
Does the Giants system the last few years, platooning, bringing in veterans, and then they really don't get to play, guys like Conforto, Soler signs a 3-year deal, is only here for a few months, and then gets dealt. Does that hurt the Giants in free agency around the league? Do players talk about that and feel like, gosh, I don't want to get railroaded and go there, and then maybe I don't get to play as much?
Yeah, I mean, what I think you want them to believe in, what you have going at the top, from not only your front office but also your manager, your coaches, the teams in the clubhouse, the team in the clubhouse. Yeah, I mean, those narratives can be overplayed, and those they're not necessarily the most favorable. But I don't think there's so many factors of what they're considering. They know that if you're offering them $200 or $300 or $400 million, they don't factor into those 1 or 2 year deals that didn't work out. So they don't really, that doesn't really stay with them as much. But yeah, you do want to show a confidence in what you're doing, and a commitment to staying the course. I mean, I think there's, when Bryce Harper was out there, ultimately, he had a lot of options. But look at the leadership of the Phillies is very different today than it was when he signed. But he saw continuity in what the owner was telling him. He saw continuity in what they already had built. He clearly he saw a ballpark that would favor him. He knows the East, having been in the East with Washington. So a lot of factors played into his decision. He's from the West Coast, so there was certainly some potential favor, this direction. But ultimately, you look at what he chose and look at how he's done and look at how the team has had success. He obviously put a lot of thought into it, and and that's what you like. And hopefully, you'll get the kind of guy who finds your situation to be appealing like that.
Do teams like the Phillies and the Mets with Steve Cohen, and the Phillies owner and the Yankees, do they have an advantage having one owner write the check and say, I'm going to go get my guy like Steve Cohen's done, and I'm not going to be outbid? Does that have an advantage over an ownership group where you have to maybe go to more than, I guess, the board? Is that how the Giants have to work it? Is it a board, or is there one person within the Giants that has the final say?
I mean, I always felt like, that Larry represented ownership for us for the most part. I mean, obviously Peter, when Peter was president, and then Bill Newcomb when Bill was president, we always felt like we could go to one person. At times we would talk to, some of the larger investors or the executive committee, but, as much as that was the case, we relied on one voice for the most part. And I think the Giants have been consistent with that even since we left, that there's one voice that they really are, that baseball ops has to answer to or work with. But I feel like that the Giants are, consistently supportive of paying big money to get big things done. And I think the challenge that you have, is as much as anything is, sometimes a single owner, can make an emotional decision. It's harder for a group of investors to make an emotional decision, because it takes a lot of different people to have that same sense of emotion.
Was it what's the owner of the Phillies? Is it Middlecroft or Middleton?
Middleton. Yeah.
Middleton. Didn't he fly out personally to talk to Bryce when you guys were You guys were pretty close to getting Bryce, it appeared.
Yeah, I wasn't. I obviously wasn't still with the club at that point.
Oh, that's right. That was Farhan's first year. That's right. Yeah.
But I do think that anytime an owner, can, again, represent the club well, it's always going to be an advantage. But I do think that sometimes a group of owners can be a little bit more reserved than a single owner who just can make an emotional, plea. And I think at some level, Peter, made an emotional plea, with Zito back in the day. And certainly some emotional pleas with Bonds as well.
Too,
but I do think that emotional plea can sometimes give you an advantage. But again, whether they can make a decision faster, yeah, sure, maybe they can make a decision faster. But I've never seen the Giants be slow to make a decision. I think that their structure is pretty well set, and I think that there's always been support, at least as long as I was there, on the baseball side.
Bobby, going back to free agents and trades, was there ever a trade or a free agent signing that almost happened? It was down to the wire. There was a verbal agreement or something, and it just ended up falling through.
Yeah, I mean, we very publicly made a deal with the Marlins that was pending,
Oh,
Stanton's
Stanton. Yeah.
approval of the trade. We made the deal with for Beltran with the Mets, and that was pending his acceptance of the deal. He ultimately did accept. The difference, of course, Beltran was accepting a deal that he knew would be only for 3 months or 2 months. Stanton was making a deal where he had to approve where he would be for the next 8 to 10 years. So he had certainly his bias of opportunity, knowing that the Yankees were out there, and that worked against us. I mean, we had trade opportunities. We worked hard to try to trade for Hunter Pence in 2011, and when we couldn't get the Astros to agree to anything we were offering, we pivoted to Beltran. Ultimately, in 2012, we were able to go back out and at that point get Hunter from the Phillies. So Cole Hamels was a close call at one point with a no trade clause. We worked hard to try to acquire him at one point, did not go through. But sometimes the trades that don't go through haunt you, and sometimes you realize, well, maybe it was for the best, as they turn out.
You got any more, Bora, right there?
Yeah, sure. I asked Ned this last week or a couple weeks ago when he was on. When you're in charge of the team, what percentage of your time and energy is focused on the big league club, and then what percentage of your time and energy is focused on the minor league club?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question in terms of percentage. I mean, you're kind of dual focused, but you spend more face time with your major league club because you often are traveling with them on the road. You're obviously trying to be home at home games. So, in terms of face time, your face time is at least 70%, with your major league club. But you have that other 30% face time where whether you're dealing with the international market, or you're dealing with the amateur draft, or you're dealing with your minor league system. But in terms of your attention, you're staying very focused on the 880 plus players in your minor league system as well, because every one of them matters. And even as much as a young kid that you just signed that's in the Dominican Summer League, who you just gave 6 figures to, not to mention the guys you gave 7 figures to, they all matter, and they're all important. And you're really trying to learn about them sometimes through the eyes and ears of your scouts, and the eyes and ears of your player development people. We got to see a lot more video, these last decade plus, than we ever have. The accessibility of cameras in all the minor league parks, and able to even see games live. It's not as good a quality, of course, as you'd see on ESPN, or of course if you were there live, but you're invested. So, you want to know, how each guy's doing all the time. So there's a lot of attention, but you really have so many focuses, from everything that you're doing that's innovative, that affects everybody in the system, to your international market, your amateur market, your player development system, and your minor league players, and obviously your major league club. There's a lot of pillars in your leadership team that you're depending on to help keep the best information flowing in, and you just got to stay available. You can't make it hard for you to be reached. You have to stay available so people can catch you and talk with you and run ideas by you and speak the truth to you. And it's Alan Byers used to say his favorite guy on his staff was the guy who would tell him what he didn't want to hear. And and I think there's a lot of wisdom in that. Having a bunch of yes guys around you can help keep you pretty mediocre. So having guys that will disagree with you and will push back, makes you better.
Bobby, is there, when you were in the draft room, whether you were assistant or the head guy, is there a guy that you wanted as a Giant, you wanted to draft him, but your scouts and other guys were saying, no, we prefer this guy? Is there a Giant that maybe is out there playing today that got away, that could be a Giant that the Giants had passed on?
Oh yeah. But
anybody you could share that we would
no.
like. Oh, okay.
No.
You mean we could have had
yeah,
Clayton Kershaw and you?
I wouldn't take Kershaw over Lincecum as much as I,
Oh,
admire
is that the
Kershaw.
same draft?
It
Is that the
was,
same? Oh,
it
wow.
was, it was.
Yeah.
But I will say that our scouts and scouting director John Barr, and then for a long time Dick Tidrow, and of course Brian, who was a scouting director as well prior to that with the Yankees. I mean, they have dreams and nightmares about what could have been, and they're faced with the hard decisions. I mean, for a GM or assistant GM in that room, we're influencers, but we're not making the final call. Ultimately, we're empowering our people to make those final calls. We give as much direction as we can up to a point, but at the end of the day, you want the people who are out there seeing them, and the people who are out there getting to know them. As much as we or Brian or any GM goes out and sees guys, we're getting a glimpse.
Right.
And we're ultimately relying on putting good people in a position to help make those calls. And so, yeah, there's guys that we look, we can, armchair quarterback the room all day long, and we can be disappointed or surprised as to where a guy is on the board at any given time, high or low. But ultimately, we've put our confidence and faith in our people, and I think that if you can't put your faith and your confidence in your people, then you're putting all the faith and confidence in yourself. And clearly, as a general manager, you're not able to see as much as what those guys see, because again, you're divided. Like Laura asked, I mean, you spend a lot of time looking at your major league club and making sure your manager and your team feel supported.
Right. You're running the whole
And
ship
guiding.
where you're letting other guys do what they got to do. Now, John Barr, he was the head of the scouting. He was the top scout for the Giants for years. Actually, I was with the Dodgers for a while, I believe, too, wasn't he?
Yeah, I mean, Mets and Orioles.
Yeah.
He's had a great baseball career. I
Yeah.
think, we look at all the great acquisitions we had over the years, and I think that he was probably one of the top executives that we added in really my 25 years. We didn't add very many, and clearly what he brought to the table and in the draft room, and
Wasn't he responsible for drafting Buster?
yeah, he was. And his relationship went back with Buster, going back to seeing him in high school. And, that's a good scout. I mean, a good scout retains the guys he sees at a younger age, even as they get older, and he continued to follow. And he had a belief in not only the ability of a Buster Posey, but he had a belief in who he was and who Buster represented and how he carried himself. And Buster's story is, was written, tremendously, but he was a game changer. Not only what he did on the field, but how he led our clubhouse off the field.
Absolutely. Total. I mean, maybe the best draft pick in many years. I mean, was some great ones in this century with Kane 02, and then Lincecum and Bum and Buster and Belt and Crawford. I mean, you guys built up it's really the last dynasty in baseball, the Giants. For 3 and 5 years. It hasn't been done since the Yankees 98, 9, and I think the Yankees did it in the late 90s and 2001 or whatever it was. Yeah.
2000, yeah.
Or 2, whatever the last one. I can't remember.
Yeah, 2000 they beat the Mets, and then they ended up winning in 2009 as well in the new Yankee Stadium.
Yeah, right. But John Barr was also responsible for Elliot Ramos, I believe, in 2017, and then Joey Bart the following year, which a lot of Giants fans disappointed that, some people said he just needed a new start, and maybe that's true. I don't think he was ever truly given a full shot by the current front office. And, I met Joey in last spring when I was in the clubhouse in spring training. Super neat guy, really easy guy to get along with. I think the talent's there. I think baseball players, they need rhythm. They need to play. And you're never going to I don't understand. It's frustrating for me to watch the guys that are top draft picks in the organization, and they're not getting they get an at bat here or there. I mean, we watched Matos take a called strike tonight, but he's not getting that many at bats. It takes a while. I mean, we see major leaguers struggle. Guys go into big, long slumps. I mean, Juan Soto's, I think he's like 1 for his last 18 or something. It happens. It's just what was it with Bart? You guys drafted him. It was your last draft, I believe, right? That you had was Joey.
Yeah, and that's such a disadvantage to a player. Sometimes when the leadership changes, especially with a player in the category of only months after you got drafted, the leadership changes, and I think that that can be difficult. And sometimes again, new leadership comes in with a certain philosophy, a certain belief of what they're looking for, and I can't. Having not been there to understand exactly the dynamics of, the comings and goings of Joey and expectations upon him, I mean, he was, really very favored by all of us in the draft room, and it was a no doubter for us at the time. But I do think that there's a challenge when you have an incumbent catcher like a Buster Posey, or as you've seen the Patriots experience the post Tom Brady era, and
right,
it's not every day that you have a Steve Young to follow a Joe Montana. I mean, it's hard, and so I think that the expectations were so heavy, and it also had a new leadership, and I think that every player, even drafted at that level, there's some development time, but for the most part, Joey's going to develop himself because he's talented enough. It's just we got to make sure and stay out of the way. And whatever the shortcomings were, ultimately having competition, with Patrick Bailey and other options, I think the club decided to go a different way. But I'm excited to see him do well, and I think sometimes getting into a new place does give you a chance to have a fresh start and not wear the saddle of having to follow an icon and a future Hall of Famer, which is, it's a lot to ask. And Buster, physically could have played a lot longer, and yet, he knew when his time was done, whether it's, family or just the physicality of the position, playing so much behind the plate. But, again, I think Joey's having success this year. Hopefully that continues for him. And
I hope so too. Patrick's
leading baseball defensively, in all categories and categories, and that's impressive.
Oh, he's a great defensive catcher. I think they would have been a great kind of platoon, because that's one position you do need more rest. I think about Buster retiring and hitting 300 in his final season. And what's amazing to me is Buster did it in the pre-framing era where the guys got to go on one knee. Squatting is not easy for 9 innings. Yeah. And I mean, I tried catching in practice and I couldn't do it. I just, it's just, I didn't like it. And I can't imagine getting in the total squat for 9 innings and then, coming back the next day and doing it. I mean, they say it wears you down. I mean, you look at Johnny Bench, finished his career at third base, and, Mike Piazza, they all say that these guys could have done so much more damage at the plate had they played a different position. But I know Buster was pretty stubborn and only wanted to catch, even though they were suggesting first base at times for him.
Yeah. Well, I think it's true. I mean, hey, Bora, did you do much catching?
I did a little catching. Yeah, I didn't do too much, but I had the gear. I had the big red Easton roller bag that I had to carry to every game.
That's good. I remember that. Well, you don't
have a catcher's face though, Bora. It's too small.
No, I know.
Yeah, all I ever wanted to do was catch. Hitting was second for me. I just wanted to catch. I love catching, and I agree. I think that there's something special about Buster and his drive, but it is a hard position. It does create a lot of wear and tear. So,
do you see with catching? It looks like they may implement next spring as a trial, and then maybe in the 26th season introduced the robo calls or the challenge system, the ABS. Do you think that will change if they go to that? It will change how catchers set up, and they'll go back to the traditional squat where they have more flexibility to drop to block balls in the dirt instead of backhanding them and get, moving their body over, shuffling to block a ball. Will that take away from guys' games like Patrick Bailey, who are tremendous at framing and stealing strikes?
Yeah, I think it'll have an impact. I mean, I'm not sure if it'll affect the drop to one knee or not, but it's going to definitely affect some of the metrics that we're paying attention to. I was at an Oakland Ballers game last week, and I saw the challenge. Whether it's the catcher, the pitcher, or the hitter, they can all make a challenge. And every time there was a challenge, it got overturned. So yeah, I think it'd be very interesting to have that implemented at the big league level. And it's relatively seamless. I mean, as a fan watching the game, you don't necessarily see a big difference until there's a challenge. But I think it'll be interesting if baseball is ready for that.
Well, we've got a couple of super chats. I don't know if you'll like them, but it doesn't look like one of your fans here. He says your worst trade, McCutchen and Longoria. So
yeah, I think the loss of what we gave up, with Longoria ended up being relatively, minimum considering.
Wasn't that Christian Arroyo?
Yeah, but also some younger guys too. And so I think
I don't think that was a bad trade.
I think we came out ahead because we had control years on Longoria. I think that with McCutchen, it was a tough deal. I mean, I think when you have a player like Brian Reynolds, we stole him in the second round. He should have been a first round pick. And we had some time where he was injured in his first year. We really should have given him a longer run, but we felt like we had to, put a veteran in the outfield, and the free agent market was relatively, not fitting to what we wanted to spend, and the, trying to stay out of the CBT, and the multi-year nature of some of those guys was cost prohibitive. But I love McCutchen, and I love the fact that he's back doing what he's doing with Pittsburgh, and of course there with Brian Reynolds. But
right,
my stomach hurts every time a former Giant minor league player, isn't a Giant, and I whether it's I love seeing these guys come through our system. I hate to see them go, and so I would find another way to get McCutchen than give up Brian Reynolds if I could do that again, no doubt.
Yeah, I mean, it's tough. I mean, negotiations, I'm sure, are very difficult. The other team wants what they want. You want to get what you want, and there's got to be a give and take. That's how trades happen. I'm sure, like you said, I'm sure you didn't want to give up Brian Reynolds, but they probably wouldn't make the deal without Brian Reynolds.
No, they wouldn't have. But the reality is, you have to give up something to get something, and
right.
I think we were hoping that we could put it all together, in 18, by putting some veterans around, even though they weren't in their prime, they still had a lot to offer in Longoria and McCutchen. With we still had Posey, we still had Belt, we still had Crawford. We still had Panic. We felt like we had enough, to, we no longer had Pablo, so we needed to do something at third. And, at the end of the day, we still didn't have enough offense. And we did both 17 and 18. We had 1,000+ DL days, which, certainly didn't help us, get the best of our club. And, but yeah, I mean, it's never fun seeing your guys go away, but you're always proud of them when they do well. Although, again, you always wish it was still with you. So,
I got another question for you from, let's see, we got another question here from you with Cliff Martinez, one of our longtime listeners and members. Says, Bobby, with 25 years in the game, is there a specific decision or approach you would have altered if given the chance? Additionally, what is your most memorable experience from your career in the sport? Great question, Cliff.
Yeah, I mean, specific decision or approach you would have altered. I mean, I think the I mean, we already mentioned, Brian Reynolds, but anytime we've given up some of our better prospects, it's always a pit to my stomach, because I'm a big believer in our guys, and when you're in development, part of your job is to, not only believe in your guys, but to help them succeed. So, those are hard decisions to make. And so, I would say, wow, I mean, there's a lot of decisions over the years. But what was the second part of the question?
Let me put it back up there again. Your most memorable experience in the sport.
I mean, there's a lot of them, but I remember being in the clubhouse. I remember sitting with Brian Sabian in Texas when Renteria hit that home run. What was it? Game 5.
Game 5, yeah,
in Texas, and at that moment, I think we both knew that we had a chance to win this thing. And I remember walking to the clubhouse with him, heading into the bottom of the 9th. We went into the Rangers clubhouse, and I'll never forget, Brian, after the final out, just putting his head in his hands and just weeping with excitement and celebration. It was probably one of the most memorable moments for me. We're alone there in Bochy's office, and
wow.
And I think soon after his sons come in, but it was just a great moment. Brian had worked his lifetime for that, and there we are, experiencing the first one in 2010. That was incredible. I mean, I won't forget any of them, but obviously in 14, sitting with Boch and Felipe in the clubhouse, and him mentioning to us that if you see Bumgarner warming up, he's coming in, and sure enough, I'm sitting there watching, and in comes Bumgarner from the bullpen in Game 7, and I hear Felipe behind me say, "This game is over." And I'm thinking, I'm not superstitious, but I know probably not to say that, but I'm like, if Felipe can say that, I'm gonna believe it with him. And sure enough, that was incredible.
That may be the most memorable moment that I can think of in the history of the job. I mean, the Ishikawa homer too,
Yeah.
in to win the pennant at home was electric, and then to do what Bum did in Game 7, I don't think we'll ever see that ever repeated, where a guy pitches Game 5, a complete game, and he comes back and pitches. What did he pitch? 4 1/3, 4 2/3.
5.
What was it? 5 full innings, or
5 full innings.
Wow, just unbelievable. 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th, and 9th. He comes out in the 5th. That was just too much. And I mean, Giants fans, I think we got kind of spoiled, 3 and 5 years, and then it's like 16. It looks like, is it going to happen again because of the way the season started off great, best record in the first half, struggled in the second half, but then looks like they were putting it together against Chicago, if they get that Game 4, no one will ever know what would happen in Game 5, but a lot of people felt like Johnny Cueto was going to get it done.
Yeah, in terms of regrets, though, I mean, in 16, we were offered Melanson for a package of some of our best arms in the system, including at the time Derek Law, who was killing it on the big league club, and ultimately we did not pull the trigger on that. And in terms of regrets, I do regret maybe if we had gotten Melanson, or any closer at that time, to help solidify the pin. You probably win that game in Game 4, and then with Cueto going Game 5, you got to like your chances. I mean, you never know what happens in an LCS. You never know what happens in a series. But yeah, and I think I regret in the off season of 16 going into 17 that we didn't do more to supplement. We got so focused on the bullpen. I wish we'd done more. Wish I had, led us to do more offensively, that winter. And but again, there's regrets in the years that we won too, things that we wish you could have done more of or better. But there's a lot of gratification and satisfaction when we do win. So.
Yeah. Now, was there any thought at all in 2018? Because you had mentioned you needed to get some offense, and you trade for McCutchen, trade for Longoria. Was there any thought at all or talk in the organization of going with the rebuild?
Yes. Yeah, it was definitely a consideration. It was a consideration. But it didn't feel right. Given our investment, that we had in the club currently. And we still had so many core elements, core pieces of those championship teams. It just felt like it was too soon. It just felt too soon.
Yeah, I saw in 21, Buster, Belt, and Crawford have big years, so they still had life in them in 18. Yeah. It just Buster was coming off that hip though, wasn't he?
Well, those three guys wouldn't have been a consideration to sell off,
Right.
But other guys could have been. I think we just felt like that, we go back to 2013 trade deadline. I mean, we'd won in 12, but now in 13 we're scuffling, and we're clearly available to make deals to sell guys off at the deadline. But to Brian's credit, he set a price tag and said, if you hit this price tag, okay, we'll move some of our best guys. Not whether it's Javi Lopez or even 100 Pence, but they weren't guys we wanted to see go. And I think ultimately hanging on to them, if we by hanging on to them, look what happened in 14. And so I think that we had so much success with these guys. I think it was very hard, even after a tough 16. We felt like going into 17 and 18, we still had a chance to gather ourselves back. And unfortunately, I don't know what those teams could have accomplished had they stayed healthier. We lost half a year, both of Bumgarner in both 17 and 18, but we also lost other guys that were key elements. And in fact, at the end of 18, I mean, Buster was hurting and had to have surgery, come late August, early September. And, we had our challenges, but, I think that that's why it's so special when you do accomplish what you accomplish in 10 and 12 and 14, how hard it is, and how many things go your way. We still had DL days. We still had people hurt. We still had people that weren't able to be there, at the end, even like Kane in 14, he wasn't able to be there at the end, but he did a lot to help us the first half of the year. And so but then you get Jake Peavy and you bring in a Jake Peavy and you had Tim Hudson, I mean, again, it's fun to see it come together, but I think we felt like we had enough there to keep it going a little longer, and obviously we weren't able to do it. But 21 happened a few years later, but still some of our key guys were there to help do that.
You mentioned in 2017 here, in 18, Calva Kaminga donates $10. Thank you, Calva, for that. He says, "Hi, Bobby. Why do you think Joe Panik's career fell off so soon? A lot has been made of a concussion he had in 2017 that contributed to his lack of production moving forward. What do you think?"
No, I think there's a lot to be said for that. I do think that he was never a super athlete. I mean, he was a good athlete. He just was never a super athlete. And I think his his legs didn't do him any favors, in the latter part of his career. But I think the concussion definitely had an impact. I think, that's not a position that you typically are expecting to experience, a long delay after a concussion, but he had that. And, but, I think the athleticism, as good an athlete as he was, he just, his legs, I think, aged more quickly and probably affected his range and probably affected his bat.
When a trade deadline comes up, like we just saw the one here that just passed in the end of July, is the trade to trade a player or to bring in a player, is that solely at the discretion of the GM or the president of baseball ops, as it's called today? Is it your call, or does ownership say, no, don't get rid of? How does that work?
No, it's a team effort. I mean, I think we always, from Peter to Bill to Larry, I mean, we always collaborated together in Brian's office or in my office or in their office, or in the deadline war room. I mean,
Mhm.
we always collaborated. I mean, I think Peter and Bill and Larry all tried to balance empowering the baseball department to make final decisions, but there were times where there was clearly a preference to not do something, or a preference to do something, or a preference not to get rid of someone, and those preferences were communicated and talked about and incorporated, but we were debating things together. I never felt like it was us and them. It was always just us together.
Mm.
It was always one group.
Yeah, I mean, I looked at this deadline. I'm pretty outspoken here. I'm known for my opinions. I don't hold back, but I'm not paid by anybody, so I can say, I'm not a Giants beat writer. I can just say it. Um, I felt the Giants should have traded Blake Snell this trade deadline. I didn't think they had the horses to compete for a wild card, and unfortunately, I've been correct in that assessment. He's going to walk. It cost you a second round pick, I believe, and some international money. Why is it that guys do they hold on? I mean, I know Farhan made the comment he felt like they had the best rotation in baseball. I thought that was kind of humorous to me because you only had two starters that were proven at the time, and that was Webb and Snell. The other guys are, uh, young guys that are at their innings limit, pitch more. Harrison, Birdsong, they're going to be good, I think, but they're not there yet. They've shown promise. So to say you had the best rotation to me was a little, I felt like it was disingenuous to the fans. Why would someone hold on to a Snell? I mean, the obvious answer, I guess, is you think you can make a run, but what responsibility does a GM at that point have to say, gosh, it's really low odds for us to make a run? And how do you weigh that, whether to make that move or just to stay with it, with a guy?
I mean, the odds of of making the playoffs are pretty well known by that time. So that's one factor. You're weighing your odds. Two, you're weighing your chances of keeping the player, in the future, and the advantages and the cost of that. But the advantages of that, of course, play a factor, and the cost. I think the third factor is, you're really you're trying to make sure you're going to get a deal that is meaningful.
Yeah.
Clubs have a way at the deadline of having a price that they're willing to pay to a point, and if they're only willing to give you, a top 30 prospect, even if there's three or four of them, but they're top 30, and so those three or four guys will slot into your top 25 or top 20. I think the question becomes, what are the chances of those guys being impact players for you at the big league level? And you've got to weigh what you're being offered. Even if you get offered one guy who has a chance to be a regular on your everyday in your everyday lineup, that can be enough to push you towards a deal. But when you have, three or four that are, maybe 25-man roster guys at some point, but not necessarily regular contributors, or in terms of your projection, it makes it hard to give up, a valuable major league, starter, knowing that you're not going to get enough back. So those are the three things you're going to weigh. So the offers, your chance of making it, and your chance of retaining them.
Do you have any aspirations of getting back into the game as in the position that you were in as a top guy running an organization? If a team called that said, "Hey, Bobby, we're interested," is that something that you would consider?
Oh yeah, I mean, I've continued to talk to owners each winter about relative openings. I mean, I think that part of the disadvantage for me is having children that are still school age, that we're very home here in the Bay Area, so it's really hard to think about leaving the Bay Area. And But I think the right situation, and I've had situations that have been interesting, but not yet the right situation. And so I stay involved in the game in different ways. I mean, but one way is through Future Star Series, which we deal with top high school prospects that play at our signature events, during the fall here, most recently at Fenway Park, and a couple weeks in Hartford, Connecticut, and then the beginning of October at Globe Life Field in Texas. And so we get to see and work with some of the top high school talent in the country. And that's fun for me from a development standpoint. It's fun for me, to meet some of these families, meet these kids, get a chance to evaluate and work with these coaches as they're investing in these players. And so that's a fun way for me to stay connected in the meantime. And obviously, I love following the game and passionate about it. And but I do have a son now in college, a daughter, playing high school sports, and a youngest playing, YBL or
that's great.
travel ball and basketball. And so I don't lack for things to do, but I love the game and really hate to miss the Giants at the night. And at the right time, maybe the right situation, for sure.
Well, that's fantastic. Every time I hear Hartford, my ears perk up because I lived back there for 7 years. 2 of my children were born at Hartford Hospital.
Yeah.
And lived in Connecticut outside of Hartford. But yeah, it was a good time. I love that area. That's so passionate about the Red Sox and the Yankees. I live right in the middle of 2 hours to New York, 2 hours to Boston. And where I lived, it was 50-50 split. Everybody, you were either a Red Sox or a Yankee fan. And every now and then you found a Mets fan, but not too often, not too many of them. But Bora, any more? I know you got several questions while we have Bobby. I don't want to keep you too long, Bobby, but we appreciate you spending time with us because this is a real treat to a lot of fans that follow the Giants. They didn't get a chance to hear much from you in the last few years, and good to hear that you're still following the game and being one question before we go to Bora. I have, what do you think of some of the rules changes since you've been out of the game? The we call them the Manfred man at second base, the pitch clock, the 2 disengagements over to first base. What do you think of all these new changes that's happened since you were last, in an official position in the game?
Yeah, I mean, I've enjoyed the changes as a fan. I mean, I think the runner at second base is one that I didn't expect to like, but I actually really like it. I think if I worked in the front office, I would not like it. As much as I love to protect our pitching, I just so desperately, I don't want to lose a game that way. I don't mind winning a game that way, but I hate losing a game that way. So I think if I were in the front office, I don't think I would like that rule. But as a fan, it's invigorating. It's fun I flip around channels just to watch the 10th inning of some of these teams at times, just because they're so entertaining. I do like the 3 pitcher rule. I think it's good for baseball. I think it's good for the pitchers too, to not be so situational that they only face one guy. I think, I'm not sure I'm a big fan of limiting the number of times you throw over to first, but I get it. I mean, I'm sort of indifferent to that one, but I'm enjoying what we're seeing, and I hope that they continue to be innovative in the game. And I think someone asked a question, I just flashed on the screen, some of the innovations in the game that you think are going to change the way players play, or change the way we build rosters in the future. Yeah, I mean, I think we're already seeing some of that. I mean, I think if they do implement a rule of some sorts relative to the length of time starting pitchers have to pitch, which I've heard about recently. I mean, I think that will definitely affect how clubs build their roster. I actually think that would be good for the game in a lot of ways.
Logan Webb's value will go even higher.
Well, exactly. I really hate to see these guys go only 3 innings, or I think the opener has its place at times in a given situation, but I don't want to see too much of that. I really like to give the ball to a guy that knows he's going out there for 5 or 6 innings. I had the experience of working with whether it's a Barry Zito or seeing a Madison Bumgarner get ready, or a Tim Lincecum or a Ryan Vogelsong or Jonathan Sanchez or Tim Hudson or Jake Peavy. I mean, the energy that those guys bring to a clubhouse before their starts. I mean, they know they're not going out there for 2 innings. They're going out there to take it deep. And I really think that clubs feed off of that at the time.
Yeah, I would think there'd have to be an exception to that rule. What if the guy's just getting rocked and he's giving up 7, 8, 9 runs, and he's only
I'm
got?
sure there will be. Yeah.
I mean, you can't leave a guy out there merciless. I mean, we're gonna have the Little League rule, the mercy rule, coming in to play.
Yeah.
I mean, that would be crazy. Plus, there's got to be a pitch. You can't have some guy throwing 50 pitches in an inning.
No. I haven't seen what the rule will actually look like, but just the mere fact that they're even talking about it, that would be a big shift in the game right now, if in building rosters, if something like that did get implemented.
Now, Bobby, would you say, with your history in player development and scouting, does that give you an advantage to being in a front office versus if you look at Farhan, who's the president of baseball ops right now? His history is kind of in analytics. What's the difference there, and is there a advantage or disadvantage to one of those?
Yeah, I mean, my experience in player development, I feel like, was always a huge help to me, just because I understood players and had empathy for where they were coming from and the hardships that they went through to get drafted, to get signed, to get healthy, to get at bats, to move up in the system, to get transferred in the middle of family visiting them in AA, and now you're moving them to AAA, and they're excited, but meanwhile their whole family's in Richmond, Virginia, and you're taking them to Sacramento or whatever the next day. So I feel like it really helped me understand the player a lot better by being in the scouting and player development side. I really enjoyed that, and so then when they get to the big leagues, I understand how significant that is because of what they've been through to get there. And so I don't take that lightly. I take it, I really take it very, seriously on their behalf and value that. But I think that, that's just my experience. I think from Farhan's experience, I think the unique thing for him, I think that gives him different advantages is just the ability to understand, what makes up, a given player analytically that can give you an edge on any given day with the roster or lineup or use of an opener or bullpen. So understanding those elements, has its own advantages. I think that, my belief as a general manager was to hire the best person possible to lead us in the amateur draft, to lead us in player development, to lead us in our medical staff, to lead us analytically, the best person to lead us from a pro scouting perspective, to lead our day-to-day major league club, and to manage each of our minor league teams. And each of those pillars, international scouting director, all of these are huge. These are the pillars that build a franchise, and hiring the best people and then being able to empower them, motivate them, encourage them, and support them, becomes the job of the general manager. And so you're generally familiar with everything that's going on in your system, but you've put key people to lead it, and you trust them and you empower them. And I think that's the fun part of being a general manager, is just being able to see your people do their best work.
Now, I know the goal is always to win, but is there pressure at all from ownership, or is there a quest within the organization? When you look at what LA is doing, LA has not missed the playoffs since 2012, I believe, somewhere around there. They've won the division every year since 2013, except 21. And the Giants right now, they seem to be falling further behind LA. And I know when you were let go, the whole thing was, we brought in Farhan we're going to be able to compete with LA more. He's got their model down. We need to go more in an analytics direction, and that's why we're going this way. And yet the gap is even, the chasm's widened, so to speak. Is there pressure at all that the ownership says we got to stay up with LA? Maybe we don't win the division every year, but we got to be close. I mean, right now it looks like it's getting wider and wider.
Well, there's pressure when there's open seats, in at the ballpark each day. I mean, there's pressure, on all of us, from the baseball side to the business side, ownership side, when the ballpark's not full. I mean, there's a lot of pressure, and oftentimes, the ballpark's, more is not full when you're not winning enough and you're not successful enough. And so, yeah, we're always feeling that pressure, and the pressure to win is really birthed out of all of us, in the organization. I think that we all feel that pressure, whether you're on the business side or the baseball side. You feel pressure. You have on the business side, you have an impact on that based on how much work you do with the baseball side, but also the revenue that's generated that gives baseball the flexibility to add players. So everybody plays a part in our success, but the pressure for the general manager is, probably the greatest pressure. I mean, I knew the pressure. I could see the pressure that Brian was experiencing, day to day. And as assistant general manager, I tried to bear as much of that load as I could, but there's no way that I could help him add sleep to his night. He was gonna toss and turn about that one, whatever tough loss we had. And it was my job just to be ready the next day to take on whatever came, and supporting, him and Boch. And then in the GM role, yeah, I mean, I still had the benefit of Brian, but, I began to feel that pressure too, in a different way in the GM role. And I think but the pressure to win is always shared. I mean, it's never on just one person, and it ultimately is shared. And I think that we all are responsible to bear our share of that load of burden and responsibility, and to take ownership of what we could do or what we could do better. And again, nobody likes to lose in a clubhouse or in a ballpark or in a front office. They just, fans, and I think that there's a lot more, voice that we get now as a front office to what the fans think. It's not just what our beat writers think. Now we see a lot more of what our fans think, and that can be hard to see and hard to read and hard to hear sometimes. But it's a wake up call, when the fans are unhappy, and we also, though, can't make decisions based on any one fan or any one comment. We ultimately have to be strategic and be thoughtful and be collaborative to make sure that we're making decisions for the right reason, for the best of the organization for the long haul. And sometimes you do make tough decisions that hurt in the short term, but you believe they'll help you in the long term. And but there's a lot of things that sometimes we know in the front office that the fans just can't see, or even sometimes the clubhouse can't see, and those things just won't be known. You'll never know why, but you just sometimes those are the bitter pills you have to swallow in the front office.
Bobby, I don't know if you can answer this question really, because I mean, you signed Luciano in 2018. I'm pretty sure you signed him as a shortstop, right?
Yeah.
And he's developed with the Giants, and now it's pretty obvious that he's not a shortstop, but he's really athletic. When you signed him, did you envision him to be the shortstop of the future, or did you see him projecting to like a third base or an outfield spot?
I mean, we always know. I mean, every conversation whenever you have a shortstop in the draft or international sighting, the first question you always ask yourself is, can he stay at shortstop?
Mm-hmm.
And to the best of our ability, we're always going to want to give an update to that year to year. Again, one of the advantages of a shortstop is that they're typically, even if they're not ultimately a shortstop, if they're athletic enough to play short, they're athletic enough to play other places, whether that be third or whether that be second in this case, first or
yeah,
right.
I've been suggesting first base for him.
So there's so many different options for a shortstop. I mean, I look at the Padres, I look at their entire infield. I think at one point or another, all of them were shortstops, Machado included. I mean, there's an advantage to signing athletic kids, and the end all be all is not that they all stick at shortstop. So
yeah, their outfield is shortstop too. Tatis and Merrill.
There you go. I mean, and hats off to them for getting the athletic guys. Ultimately, though, that not everybody's going to stick. So you have to be prepared for an adjustment, and you think through those adjustments, over the years, and when you get confronted with them, you try to be creative, but you also try to make the right call, because you don't want to bounce a guy around if you can help it. In this day and age, bouncing guys around happens more often than not, but if you can, you'd like to find the next best landing spot for them, and maybe they feel that second's the right spot. I guess we'll wait and see.
A question I have, Bobby, with in terms of scouts and minor league directors of player development, are all of those guys, the top ones around the league, are they? I don't know. Can't think of a better word other than poachable. Can you go after those guys and offer them more money to bring in the best in the game, or does Major League Baseball say you can't do that? It has to be a promotion of some type, title wise.
Yeah, there's rules in baseball that prevent you from poaching another team's people, and so there's a request process where you can't tamper with an employee of another club, and and it's really a best practice, for the sake of the industry, but it does sometimes hurt people, because they may get stuck in an organization, and unless somebody calls and asks for permission to talk to them for a promotion, they really can't go anywhere. They can let their contract expire, or they can step away from the game for a while and then come back into another organization. But it is a way to sort of keep some competitive balance. I think the competitive balance is an important part of not only what you see on the field, but what happens off the field. And if we can keep everyone with a balance of talent in front offices and in scouting and player development, ultimately the players at all those clubs and ultimately the industry benefits. But as much as we could, we would try to make sure that we were allowing our guys to leave if a better opportunity existed. But we also did our best to make sure that we offered as good an opportunity as could be found out there whenever possible. And there were times where we experienced the potential loss of a key staff person, and we would offer a promotion or incentive to stay. But our goal was to stay ahead of that, because we could see the value in our people, but we also knew sometimes an opportunity elsewhere could be better, and we'd obviously give permission and let them go. But I think that the off season, as much as we don't read about the front offices and the change of scouts and player development people, that's a big part of our off season. I think in fact, right now you're working on building your staff, scouting analytically, your front office, your player development system internationally right now, because this is when contracts are coming to an end, and when people are available, and when you're going to have openings, whether people are retiring or you're making changes. Now's the time to start building that staff.
Yeah. Laura, any more?
Yeah, I have one more. How important is clubhouse continuity and the aspect of just having a good time in the clubhouse, having good players, having good people? Because this year with the Giants, and it's been this way for the past couple of years, they're just rotating guys. They'll bring in a guy off the street, they'll bring him in for 10 days, and then they'll just kick him to the curb. How important is having a strong and united team that can kind of play together and win together?
Just from our experience, that was one of our strategies, was to try to make sure we brought in the right kind of people that could stick. We were going to, have guys come up and down at times, but we would oftentimes have a 40-man roster that was at 38, 39, or 40. So we weren't flipping guys on and off the 40 as much, just because we wanted to make sure we got the best out of the 40 that we had. And if we felt that somebody was no longer worthy of that 40-man spot, we would take them off and maybe add somebody. But it worked for us well, just to build a chemistry in that clubhouse. Again, I can't emphasize how much Boach and Buster and Hunter Pence meant to that, even at a time in 14 where, maybe our clubhouse needed a lift. We had Jake Peavy come in and bring just a lot of great energy, and I think there's I think one of the things that Steve Kerr has said is how important it is that you have players that have compassion for each other and have a tolerance for each other. And that kind of helps them, not bury each other when things are not going so great. And I think there's a lot to be said for that. And I think that when you have players that are together, there's still going to be times that there's conflict, and there's still going to be time that if you could choose a teammate, you might not choose one or two of them. But at the end of the day, there's enough togetherness and oneness in a goal, a common goal, that I think, brings results. And I think we see, I'm not in the clubhouse of some of these teams that have talent but haven't had success as much as they should, and why that is. Maybe that is a part of the reason is because the culture of that clubhouse sometimes maybe set by the key players, maybe sometimes set by the front office, maybe a culture that's set by the manager, or a combination thereof. Maybe that's been below standard and has caused the team not to pull together. I remember talking to Jeremy Affeldt about what Colorado accomplished in, I think, 2007, winning 23 some games in a row late in the year to ultimately get into the postseason and then get to the World Series. And he said at times it wasn't, it was the players pulling together, in a tight knit way. In some cases, in spite of, the culture around them, they created their own culture themselves, and it wasn't because of the culture around them. It was because of the culture that they created amongst themselves that helped generate some of their success. And so I think it's an important element. And, the amount of roster moves made today in the game, is certainly more than I remember ever seeing. And certainly we were more conservative, partly because we believed in putting the best team we could coming out of spring training, knowing that our biggest changes were going to come when a prospect was ready, whether that was Buster coming up in May, or Bumgarner coming up later, or whomever it was, Crawford, in August, whatever the case may be, or the trade deadline. That's when we would make the next big move.
Now, Bobby, before we let you go, and we appreciate you being with us for so long, I don't think you ever had the opportunity to hire a manager because you had Bochy there. But what's that process like when you're going through a managerial search? What kind of questions are you asking, and what are you looking for, answers wise back to? There's a lot of great candidates that I'm sure come across, and the Giants have recently gone through a couple managers with Kapler and then Melvin now. But if you were hiring a manager today and you brought in 5-6 guys, how are you basing that decision on the guy you select?
Yeah, well, before I answer your question, I remember being at Scottsdale Stadium as an employee in the commissioner's office in the Arizona Fall League, and I got a message from I guess someone with the Giants or the commissioner's office that Bob Quinn was going to be arriving at the ballpark to meet with Dusty Baker, which sounded like a managerial interview. And as we know, it ended up being the hiring of Dusty for the '93 season.
Right.
But I so believe that that you're really trying to understand how a manager relates to his players. I think that you're very interested in their in-game management, and a lot of it's already known. I think that if a guy's managed in the big leagues, there's not a lot you don't already know about their in-game management and even the kind of clubhouse they set. I think you have to know your players. I think you have to know the makeup of your roster, what the makeup of your roster is going to look like for the years to come, because any good manager is going to want to know what you have now and what you have coming, because if he's going to come to you and you're trying to hire one of the best out there, he's going to want to know you've got talent, in the pipeline. And, I think that, the questions that you're going to ask, a younger, not yet experienced manager is going to be, how close they are, how much they feel ready. But I still think you want to know, kind of how they're going to relate to their players, how they relate to players in general. I think that I really believe you want a manager who believes in players. I think you want a manager who believes in young players. I think you want a manager who respects the veteran player. And you're going to ask questions to try to assess that, make sure they understand how this game runs now analytically. I mean, I want a manager who is not going to fight with, our front office, but also want a manager who's going to be able to make those decisions. I want a manager who's going to be able to make out his own lineup, with the best input that we can give in the front office. But I'm going to want to pay them to fill out that lineup card. I want to pay them to make those decisions in game. I don't want to come to them with a script. I want to make sure that they're prepared to make those decisions and own those decisions. I also want someone that's going to represent the organization, post-game interviews included, but just as a whole, I want somebody that's going to represent the name on the front of the jersey well. And, we've been very fortunate with the managers that this organization's had over the years, and, some great ones. And, I feel like that I look back and look at the comments that many of our players have made over the last several decades, going back to even before we were here, about how much they love their managers and how much they meant to them, and conversations they had, and the ways that those managers believed in them and why they succeeded. Even, Willie Mays has great stories about, why he was struggling, how he struggled early, and how the manager, believed in him and told him so. And I mean, that's what you
look at those Giants managers, from Roger Craig to Dusty to Felipe, and then Boch. I mean, you got two Hall of Famers in there, and Dusty, and for sure, and Boch, and then Roger Craig, the old hum baby himself, was a kind of brought the Giants back from irrelevance for many years. I mean, the 70s were, I grew up, first division title I had was 71 as a 10-year-old, and had to wait till 87 to see another. And then 89, of course, and that was all hum baby. And then, of course, then Dusty came in 93, as you mentioned. And, I said last question, but you made me think of one more when you were answering the question about a manager asked what type of players you got. Do free agents, when you're recruiting free agents, is that an important thing, that they want to know what you have coming in the pipeline from the minor league system, and what you're going to do to make the team better?
Yeah, I mean, it's always fun when you have an agent that represents a lot of your top prospects in the minor leagues. That helps when you're trying to acquire his major league free agent, because he can speak personally how good your farm system is. But yeah, I mean, agents are doing a lot of that research for the player. I mean, you're going to answer some of those questions, but the best agents are already doing that research for their player, so that they know where you sit, overall, especially when you're talking about a big time free agent. I mean, when you're talking about a 1 or 2 year deal, I think the club, their players are typically just looking to see how quick you're going to, are you going to win this year, or are you going to win the next year? Because they don't want to sign a 2-year deal and not get a chance to win. But the longer term deals, yeah, I mean, they're looking at what you have coming, how I heard even, about Friedman. They wanted to know, how long is Friedman going to be the president of baseball ops with the Dodgers? How long is, I think Stan Kasten going to be there? I think those are some of the things that Ohtani wanted to know, because he wanted to be tied at the hip to those guys. And
right.
And that's, that may be unique. I mean, there's not a ton of times that the front office is given that kind of, compliment. But again, wow. Yeah, those are the questions players want to know, and the agents are doing their research so that they don't even start the conversation if they don't think you have a chance.
Wow. Now you handled player assessments, player evaluations. We're gonna let you go with this. Give us your player assessment and evaluation of Bora.
I like Bora because he was athletic. He had quick hands, quick out of the box. I thought he had a good feel for the strike zone. And
he's told us all this. I just want to. I'm trying to verify it.
And I'm disappointed he's not playing college ball. So,
Bora, there you go, man. You still can play.
I still can play. I might take that opportunity, because that opportunity is still there.
Good for
you.
Hey,
trust me.
I would jump
from a guy who's 63. Go for it. Go for it while you can.
I always like players to, make sure that and as long as they're offered a jersey, they keep wearing it until someone tears it off of them or says there is no jersey for you. Then you know it's time to hang it up. But as long as there's a jersey for you, I'd keep playing.
Thank you.
There you go. Hey, you can't get any better recommendation than that, Bobby.
Definitely not.
Bora from Bobby Evans, man.
Send me a schedule.
There we go.
All right.
Well, guys, been a great treat tonight. Thank you for joining and staying with us. We will put this out and break it into some smaller videos for you. But what a treat, Bobby, to have you join us. We'd love to have you come back when maybe during the off season, during free agency. Would you be open to that and talking to us about what's happening?
Oh yeah, I'm glad to. Anytime. It's a pleasure. It's fun talking baseball. I never get tired of it. So
that's great.
All
right. Well, that's awesome because that will be a treat. It'll be interesting off season to see what's going to happen. Juan Soto's the big catch out there, but there's a few pitchers out there like Max Fried and Blake Snell will probably be on the market. We'll see what the Giants do, but who knows? There may be even a possible change. We'll see. We'll probably know that most likely within about the season ends in 4 weeks. If there is some kind of a change in any front office, they generally happen pretty quick after the season ends, right, Bobby?
Yeah, I mean, I don't. I'm biased. I don't like to see front office changes, but
right.
I get it. And
right.
I think that there's a lot more interesting things for me than what happens in front offices. So I like to see how rosters get built and how young players get opportunities this winter where they play, especially if there's some winter ball. Those are the fun conversations. Seeing front offices change.
What's more exciting is players. Yeah, we want to see players. We want to see star players come and build a roster. Yeah, I mean. It would be nice to see some bold moves made. Whoever's running the front office, if it's Farhan, change definitely has to happen for the team itself. Can't keep running back teams that are under 500. So we'll see what happens. But Bobby Evans, thank you for joining us, guys. We appreciate you being part of NorCal Sports Network. Hit the like and subscribe button if you haven't done so already. It really helps us grow the channel. And we will see you tomorrow morning with the morning game plan show at 10:30. And then tomorrow night, about 9:30, again, Giants post game. And we'll be back for that. So have a great evening. Thanks again, Bobby.